In addition to the aptly named engine of Montandon watch enterprise of Montandon Frères, we come across a similar entity in both Gavoin and French almanacs during the 19th century, namely Montandon Soeurs. This was not a single entity, rather multiple workshops carrying the same name over the generations. We encounter the name as early as 1838, where we find Montandon Soeurs seemingly liaised with Frères Favre. The role of the atelier appears highly mutable and probably was the result of the different families' industries and the young ladies' own cottage-based know-how from which they derived their income. In the case of Frères Favre, who are listed for fabrication de cadran, or et argent, Montandon Soeurs appears to have produced dentelle, or the famed Swiss lace of high repute. By 1858, the same French almanac publication lists Favre ed et elle as fabricators of gold and silver cadrans in Locle. In this instance, these Montandon sisters were alliés of the Favre. Jean-Paul Bourdin mentions a Favre-Boule frères as peintre en cadran au XVIIIe siècle, identification impossible. It will be remembered that Charles Adolphe Montandon Favre, one of Montandon Frères Locle's principal founders, married a Louise Favre-Boule, and one may wonder if this earlier mention could be related to an allié family of the Montandon Blaise-Léon group. Edouard Favre-Boule appears to have originally hailed from Moitié in the Val de Travers. Louise's father, Louis, his own genealogical data are heavily obscured by the drag of time. That Adolphe Montandon Favre had married into the Favre-Boule family suggests a horological alliance. The Blaise-Léon branch often married into the family by wedding cousins, such as Charles Frédéric, the source of Montandon Frères Locle dynasty, who married his cousin Julie Montandon, as well as Henri Montandon Blaise-Léon, architecte à Saint-Imier, son of Louis Camille, graveur et guillocheur, the father of the famed Raoul Montandon of Geneva, architect, historian, and spiritualist. Henry Montandon married his cousin Esther Amélie. Now, this branch of the Favre family, however, appears to be the one allied with Montandon Soeurs Locle. The key to this question can be found through an earlier alliance which was established between the Favre and Montandons, probably closer to 1792. Thus, the periods of activity of Montandon Soeurs spanned approximately 1792 to 1908. It will be recalled that David Henri Montandon, the author of Copie de Lettres, the business papers from the early Montandon Frères Locle establishment, referred to the Favres as Amis Favre. He had extensive dealings with Frédéric Edouard Favre-Brandt. Edouard's parents were Judith Marie Montandon, the sister of Pierre-Henri, who immigrated to America, and whose son Julien became a watchmaker to multiple U.S. presidents. They were of the genealogical branch known as Détaché du Locle. In 1792, Judith Marie married Henri Louis Favre and had a daughter, Juliette Henriette Favre. Henri Louis's brother, Frédéric Favre, also married a sister of Judith Marie. Their son was the same Frédéric Edouard Favre-Brandt. The Brandt portion comes from his marriage to Olympe Augustine Brandt. Thus, Montandon Frères themselves had an early connection with the two brothers above, who are doubtlessly Frères Favre. The above two women, who had two more sisters, Marie Montandon and the eldest Henriette Montandon. Concerning the tie between Frères Favre and Montandon Soeurs, we note the following article from the local press of 1844. En rectification article publié dans le 35e de la feuille officielle de cet État du 29 août dernier à la diligence de Loire de feu M. Edward Favre-Brandt et de Mademoiselle Henriette née Favre, épouse de M. Albert Courvoisier, ainsi qu'en rectification d'une lettre circulaire émise par les mêmes à la date du 21 août de cette année. Le public est informé que la société de commerce qui existait au local sous la raison de Frédéric et de Henri-Louis Favre et l'indivision Frères Favre et Sœurs Montandon, dissoute de fait depuis plusieurs années, l'ont été plus spécialement pour un acte de 7 août 1844. Et que c'est par erreur qu'on a annoncé que M. Jules-Henri Favre, Mademoiselle Julie Henriette Favre et Madame Louise Queenan, née Favre, étaient liquidateurs responsables des dettes de ces sociétés, dettes qui ont déjà été acquittées en grande partie et doivent l'être en totalité d'ici au 7 février prochain par Monsieur le capitaine Henri-Auguste Favre et par Monsieur Jules-Henri Favre, les deux domiciliés au local. Acquéreurs des immeubles des dites sociétés et indivisions, donné pour être publié à la demande de toutes parties dans 3 numéros successifs de la feuille officielle au greffe du local le 17 septembre 1844. Signed, Fabergé, greffier. And this was from Feuille d'avis de Neuchâtel of 1844. And this is the 10th month, the 3rd day. Thus, the two firms of Frères Favre and Montandon Soeurs were co-owned, indivisible, and coexisted together. However, this early iteration of Montandon Soeurs had only gone defunct several years prior to this 1844 notice. Therefore, the latter mentions of this name we find during the subsequent periods are different generations and different formations altogether. Yet we see how from the very beginning, as far back as the 1830s in David Henry's journal, a strong and vibrant cooperation with the Amis Favre. Montandon Soeurs appears to have enjoyed their longest period of activity in watchmaking services during the period of 1869 to 1883, which specifically matches the heyday of Montandon Soeurs' local activity. The Davoine listings and genealogical data point to multiple different groupings of sisters from several of the different family branches. Later, during 1894 to 1908, we find this appellation listed in La Chaux-de-Fonds and Bienne. Some of these lists are for non-watchmaking activities, such as mercerie, laine, et fourniture d'école at La Chaux-de-Fonds. The branches these young ladies hailed from appeared to be a mix of Détaché du Locle, Montandon de Bretzel, Montandon de Traverse, Blaise-Léon, Varoda at Bienne, and likely Montandon de la Chaux-de-Fonds. Jean-Paul Bardin mentions Montandon Soeurs Locle as follows. Montandon Soeurs, certes vers 1869 à 1844. Il s'agit probablement de Fanny Adèle Montandon et de Julie Adèle Montandon. Adresse connue, Cotard, 636 et Grande Rue 142. The above sisters are found in Montandon de Bretzel of Frederick J. Montandon. These are two of 6 daughters of Philippe Auguste Montandon, Olagère et Rapasseur au Locle. We can find him at Grande Rue 142. Later we find his son, Ulysse Auguste Montandon-Guignon, Certisseur, located at Rue de la Côte 223 with Montandon Soeurs. This is a later iteration of M.S. Locle, likely inspired by the previous. From the branch of Montandon de Travers, we find the daughters of Jean-Louis Montandon, a bourgeois de Valangin and former secrétaire de commune, dating from 1842 to 1848 for Travers, whose position suffered due to the intrigues between royalist and republican passions. This occurred after a state visit by the King and Queen of Prussia, where he had been necessitated to place the Prussian flag on various buildings of the community for the official reception of the sovereign. Louis Edouard, the politician, brother of the watchmaker Alphonse of Travers, brought Jean-Louis' career to a conclusion with a letter to the Revolutionary Committee culminating in action by the local court of justice, which sealed Jean-Louis' untenable position in these circumstances. His daughters, Geneviève, Artemise, et Palaiseuse, who married Alphonse Alcindor Huguenin Elie, Pierriste, and Bérénice Euphrasie, who had married Louis Eugène Huguenin Elie, Horologier. From these unions we may have cause to pause in awe once more, as we once again find two Locle Montandon sisters who married 2 brothers, this time Huguenin Elie. The family seems to have been prevalent in stone cutting, polishing, and similar work. The Huguenin Elie brothers, it should be noted, were half-brothers with different mothers and the same father. We find in this familial nexus an extremely tightly knit alliance, adding additional gravity to this, albeit the brothers were half-brothers here. Louis Eugene's mother was Louis Rosalie Montandon, the daughter of Jean-Frédéric Montandon, mechanicien. An analysis of the family structure yields a fascinating journey along the backbone of Montandon watch fabrication, since Jean-Frédéric was the father of Henri Louis of later Besançon fame, who operated very successfully in the local horlogerie byzantine during the period 1850 to 1884. He often competed and took medals at world expositions and was a master inventor in his own right. If Louis, later his son Henri Edouard, was or were the mystery fabricators for ébauches or watches for M. of Paris in Besançon during the 1857 to 1888 period, this would yield the plausible identity of H. Montandon Locle. Jean-Frédéric's other son, Louis Frédéric, was also a watch fabricator at Les Brenets, and later took up with Montandon Locle at the epicenter of Montandon watch fabrication on the Rue de la Côte in Locle. Louis Frédéric is the most probable candidate for pieces signed L. Montandon Locle. Therefore, we see the significant roots and liaisons between these Montandon de Travers, whose horologists overall make up 1/3 of Montandon horologists, all the way occupying a singular and central position in the story. With another Montandon de Travers, Frédéric Émile Montandon, horloger from Travers, we note his 5 daughters and 1 son, all of whom appeared tied to watchmaking. Frederick J. Montandon makes an interesting observation about this family regarding Frédéric Émile. Sa famille porte le surnom de Tourneron. This may refer to a geographical location near Couvet in the Val de Travers, just before the asphalt mines of Henri-François Montandon. Yet this is also a term related to spinning, perhaps related to la dentelle, which he had also engaged in producing under Montandon and Jean Reynaud. This family finds 4 of the daughters identified as horlogières and the son as a faiseur d'encre. Louis-Jacques certainly transferred to Locla, whereas the sisters appeared to have stayed behind in Travers. Yet all of their movements are not fully clear. Marie was a horlogière. Sophie Augustine at Travers. Rose Julie, horlogière à Travers. Elise Lina, horlogière à Travers. And Berthe Rachel, horlogière. Now Louis Jacques, faiseur d'encre au Locla, did transfer to Locla. While it is not fully clear whether this cluster of sisters participated in Montandon Soeurs, their proximity to this story is central to the same theme of the industry of all members of the family of both sexes from the earliest ages and applying skills passed on from their parents' field of work. This family cottage industry, a technology transfer of Swiss invention, yielded much needed support for the prosperity of the families and in the forming of alliances with the other similarly inclined families within the industry. And it will be remembered that Pierre-Henri, who immigrated to America and is observed by former President Thomas Jefferson, that every member of the family of both sexes were making watches from the cases to the final product. So we can see the role of the women also in this. Now, later we find the name of Montandon Soeurs and Davoins specifically related to horological support services such as réglage or polissage, and this is during the period of 1894 to 1908 in La Chaux-de-Fonds, and the same approximate period in Bienne. In Bienne at Vignol 2 address, in addition to Montandon Soeurs, we can find Jules Ali, remonteur, son of Adolphe Montandon Varoda, horloger au Locla. Adolphe had 14 children, of which 5 were daughters. These most likely constituted this iteration of Montandon Soeurs. Henri Adolphe Remonteur, the brother of Jules Ali and Montandon Soeurs Bienne, was also in Bienne at Rue du Stand, 51. At the book and gift shop in Montandon Soeurs La Chaux-de-Fonds, it is unclear who was behind this appellation. Also unclear is the identity of the horological MS La Chaux-de-Fonds, whose atelier was performing réglage plat. A possible candidate may have been Elvina Constance, régleuse, who married Charles Kuntz Montandon, pieriste et certisseur. Yet this is speculative. Now, Constance was the daughter of Louis-Auguste Montandon, horloger à la Chaux-de-Fonds, of the Montandon de Travers branch. Now, he was a very big figure who was known as Auguste Montandon. So this figure was signing watches as Auguste Montandon, yet this would be somewhat questionable due to the lack of sisters with regards to Constance, unless Constance was in the company of cousins or close relatives to have constituted this iteration of Montandon Soeurs at La Chaux-de-Fonds. Now, a closer look at the Davoin listings will provide a holistic understanding of the various MS iterations across the second half of the 19th century. And to this end, I attach a list of this period and all of the data that has been extracted from these almanacs. So this is another note for the record concerning the role of women, the alliances, the marriage alliances, and all of this that played into the story of the Montandon watch dynasty. I hope it was informative, and I hope you enjoyed this detailed information, and thank you for your attention.